So now it's time to configure our user model to log in with an email instead of a username. Now there is different ways we can do this. We could override the Django user model and actually tell it to use the email field instead of the username. So username field, but instead of actually customizing that model and having to override items in the database, I am going to go for something simpler, just because you may be okay with using the username. So what I am going to do is just make sure that the email is also the same as the username. Okay. Now when we created our user, so for Dennis, I created this manually. So we have the username as Dennis and we have this email. So we can't log in with this value. Okay, but when we create a John here in our view in register, we saved the email as the username. So there is nothing that stops us from logging in with this email because it's in the username field. Now, as one more method of basically making sure this always happens, let's say we update our email field. I also want to update the username. So for this, we are going to use something called Django signals. So I'm going to pull up the documentation and I also have a full video on this on YouTube. This is the video from just Django. You can watch here, and there are many other tutorials also available. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what that this is, and then we'll just start building this out. So Django signals are combined of senders and receivers. Okay, so basically our signals listen to actions that occur in our program. Okay, so in this case, when we save the user model, so anytime we hit save, this is going to send out a signal and it's going to send it to a receiver, and this receiver can now trigger a function and it uh, can do something in the back end with whatever occurred here. So it's going to listen for an update in the database and then we are going to trigger another action. So in this case, we have two types of signals that we are going to work with here. So I'm going to start with a pre-receive. So let me see if I can find this. So we'll just do pre_receive or pre-save. So one signal I will fire off before that model actually gets saved. So it tells us, hey, this model is about to get saved. So go ahead and fix it. We'll create a function that runs and update that username field. And we can also have another signal that fires off post save. So once the item was actually updated, then the signal will fire off. So that's just a kind of a quick overview of it, and I recommend you check this video out on YouTube by searching Django signals. It is you can see here, and 13-minute long video, and pretty things have explained in that video and good example there. So let's go ahead and just start creating it so you can actually just follow along here. It's still explain it, but I just figured I would provide you with some more resources. So in base in our app, let's create a file called signals.py. So that .py Python file, and in signals.py I want to make a quick import. So in signals, I am going to first import the pre-save signal. So from Django.signals or db, so Django.db.models.signals. Let's import the pre-save. So import pre_save. So this is basically going to tell us that anything we use in pre-save is going to go into our models, and it's going to listen for a model to save, and we can fire off an action before that model finishes. That saves process. Now the next thing we want to import is going to be our user model, because we want to fire off an action anytime our user model is created or updated. So django.auth.models import, and then this is going to be user. Okay, so we have our two imports, and here is the function that we are going to fire off when that user model gets saved. So we are going to create a function called update user, and in here we are going to pass in the sender parameter, and the senders we are going to call this, and this is going to be the function or the object that sends the signal, and then the instance. So the actual objects, so instance, and we also want to pass in keyword arguments. So key word WRGS here, and that's our function right there. Now in this function, to actually fire it off, let's just print out, we'll just say signal uh, triggered, and so to fire this function off anytime the user model is saved, we are going to use this pre-save import, and we are going to do pre-save, and we need to tell it, or we are going to do pre-save dot connect. So we are going to connect this signal to the user model. So anytime the user model is updated, so we are going to say update to the user model, and I didn't finish that import. So user. So anytime the user model is saved, and I just messed some things up here. So this is sender. So the sender is the user. Now the function we want to fire off is going to be the update user function. So when the user model is saved, pre-save, so before it's saved, go ahead and fire this function off. So let me show you how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my admin panel, and I'm going to minimize this so we can see this, and here is my console. So when I save this, we should see signal triggered print out. So I just realized we don't connect our signal. So let's finish this. So once we create the signal, we need to go into apps right here, and we are going to add a method, and this is going to be called ready. So ready, and inside of ready, we are going to pass in self. So this is how we actually configure our app. So it knows about this signal, and we are just going to import base dot signal. So we are going into the app, into base, and we are just connecting signals here. And in order for this to work, make sure that in settings.py you have your app installed this way. So you do base apps.base config, because in theory you could configure your app just like that, but that's going to give us an issue. So I will make sure everything's saved, and now my signal should fire off when I save this user model. Okay, so let's go into Dennis here, and I'm going to hit save. I will open up my terminal so you can see everything is working fine, and there we go. So this was just a listener. I listened for the user model. When we saved it, we ran this function, Now in this function, what we are going to do, and this is kind of like a duct tape fix to this problem, and or to overriding this user model is just a quicker fix, and it's worked in the so I have used it in application, so I have not really seen an issue with it. But if you are more comfortable with actually overriding the user model, you can do that too. So on save, let's just get the user, so the instance, and we'll get the user email, and we are first going to check if this email is empty. So if the email is not empty, let's go ahead and take the email and update the user. So we'll just do user dot username, and we are going to pass in the user dot email. So now what we are going to do is on save, we are going to take that email, and we don't even need to provide a username before we even save it. We are going to take that username and fill it with that email. So in here, now I can go full screen. That signal is going to fire off. We have just used that. I'm going to open up user. Let's see, it looks like I have an issue or the bug here. Invalid syntax or use. So it's look like I did equals, and then yeah, that doesn't look right. Okay. So now this should work. So now this, so we'll go into our user, and if I hit save, so my username is Dennis and my email is Dennis @email.com. 2222 four times. So I just change the data there. So let's go ahead and hit save. So we hit save. Now the email is filled with a username. So if I change this to just dennis@gmail.com, let's hit save without actually redirecting us. So save and continue editing. And now my username is dennis@email.com. So every time we save it, our email is going to fill in our username, and that's sort of the quick fix to this issue. And Django signals are used or can be very useful in situations like this. So yeah, that takes care of our issue in the next section. So let's go ahead and actually clean up our views and URLs. So our URLs here, if you notice, we are starting to configure our, let's go into back into base. So we are starting to have user URLs, products, and then soon we'll have orders. I want to separate these into their own files. So all product URLs are in their own file. All user views and URLs are in their own files. So we are just going to separate everything and clean things up.